Good evening, Western Standard viewers, and welcome to Hannaford, a weekly politics show of the Western Standard. It is Thursday, April the 9th. Heritage Canada is preparing to publish a new citizenship guide. This is the book that the government gives to new Canadians to prep them for the citizenship test that they have to pass. It also reflects the official Government of Canada view of who and what Canada is and the things that we value and the things that we don't. But if you know anything about real Canadian history, you might not recognize your old country. Some Canadian heroes you think should be in the book aren't, and others are in, and you may wonder why. Michael Bonner, our guest this week, is a former policy advisor in the field from the Harper days. These days, he's a political strategist with Atlas Strategic Advisors. He's also a historian, a senior fellow with the Calgary-based Aristotle Foundation for Public Policy, and author of the forthcoming book, The Crisis of Liberalism, The Origin and Destiny of Freedom. Michael, you seem almost overqualified for us, but thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me back.
Oh, excellent. Michael, the Western Standard published this story on Tuesday, and I think a lot of our readers are really surprised and maybe appalled at some of the ideas this government thinks you should believe and support. It's certainly very one-sided on the Indigenous file, very gay and trans-friendly, and there's a lot of people who you would expect to see in it who are very downplayed. Seems to be trying to paint a very different picture of what it is to be a Canadian than what Canadians themselves have experienced or might think it ought to be. What's going on here?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I find it very difficult to sort of enter the thought world of the liberal hegemony in Ottawa, whether in the Trudeau years or now. The citizenship guide seems to have been a problem for Trudeau Jr. since before he became prime minister. There was that famous incident over the use of the word barbaric cultural practices, condemning such things as female genital mutilation and forced marriages, which seems to be an odd sort of thing to die in a ditch over. But this has been a preoccupation for some time, and based on what I see in the media about this, I sincerely hope that the descriptions we're seeing will not come to pass.
Is Sir John A. Macdonald in the rewrite?
Not as far as I have seen.
No. That would seem to me, if it is in fact not there, that would seem a significant omission to have the country's first prime minister not mentioned.
Yes, I think that would be a serious omission, and the sort of war on John A. If this is indeed what we're facing, it's yet another. First of all, it's embarrassing. Second, it just makes the Canadian past increasingly incomprehensible and promotes the kind of forgetfulness that leaves people sort of out of touch with their own history. So yes, if that is the case, if we have no John A., if we're losing touch with the historical foundations of our country and the citizenship guide, that to me seems like a very serious problem.
Now, I think a lot of Canadians who were born here have never had any reason to study history, and therefore might not be familiar with this particular document. It is referred to in the story as a draft, and it was secured under an access to information request from Blacklock's Reporter, an organization with which we have a most cordial relationship. It seems to me that, well, a couple of things are funny about that. First of all, is this document actually out there to be discussed and maybe amended, or are they going ahead with it and we just happened to intercept it before it went to the printers? What's your sense of why there's a draft that we're talking about?
Well, it's possible to obtain draft government documents under most circumstances if you request them through the access to information protocol. I suspect that that's what happened in this case, unless somebody leaked it for some particular reason, which is also possible, but it seems less likely. on the one hand, I think a citizenship guide made by committee with sort of constant input from the public, left, right, and center, would probably not really turn out very well. On the other hand, a kind of proclamation from on high as to what the liberal overclass thinks everybody should believe about Canada is equally bad. I just don't see what the reason is for changing the citizenship guide in the first place. It was a deliberately nonpartisan document. The minister, my former boss, Jason Kenney, went out of his way to avoid so much as even appearing in the document, to avoid the perception of partisanism, and to avoid dating it, avoid the appearance that it comes only from a specific time in our history, is only relevant for a certain time. I reject the idea that the citizenship guide has become irrelevant. Our history that is articulated there, the discussions of the nature of Parliament and so forth, that doesn't go out of date.
Well, exactly. I mean, maybe can you talk about some of the things that that are likely to surprise Canadians when they, if they take the trouble to look at this? I hope they would, frankly, but there are going to be certain people who are in and certain people are out. Could you maybe expand on that a little for us? What
Well,
do you think was the reason for it?
I mean, I don't know what the reason is, but I mean, for example, the sort of the history of the governors general, there's a lot of, it looks like, based on what I see in Blacklock's reported, that there's a lot of emphasis on Adrian Clarkson and Michael Jean, as sort of identitarian concerns. So we're not talking about, again, if Blacklock's reporter is right, we're not talking about the viceregal office or what these particular personages, both lovely people, I'm sure, long history of broadcasting on the CBC and so forth. But instead of talking about the office and the particular achievements of these personages, we're talking about how one is the first refugee, and that's it. The other is the first black lady. These are obviously undeniable facts, but in the world in which identity politics of both left and right have riven Western democracies and created a kind of polarization, I would hope that our government would have learned to sort of shy away from that sort of thing now. So that's one example. And there's a lot of sort of gender identitarian stuff too. I mean, to me, it's identity politics, and I think that we have seen the kinds of evils that identity politics can do in the world. I thought we had all sort of had enough of that under the in the Trudeau years. We've seen how absurd it can look if you look at any of the footage from the recent NDP convention. It's kind of laughable at this point, but there are real dangers to it that you can that we should be alert to based on news abroad and that sort of thing. So the last place I would like to see this sort of thing would be in a citizenship guide.
Yes. So, I mean, you mentioned a couple of Governor General appointees that would appear to have been made for what you could refer to as identitarian reasons. I don't, according to Blacklock's, there's nothing in there, however, about Georges Vanier, also a Governor General, obviously a man, a decorated war hero, awarded the Military Cross, and I think a man with significant charitable work to his credit as well.
Mm-hmm.
I would have thought that a man like that would have qualified. And the other thing they're talking about former prime ministers. We had that discussion about Sir John A. Macdonald, but I can say with certainty that the document references Lester Pearson, a Liberal, John Diefenbaker, Pierre Trudeau, and Kim Campbell, but it doesn't say anything about Brian Mulroney, who, like him or not, was a far more successful prime minister than either Mr. Diefenbaker or Ms. Campbell. Then there's a a whole bunch of people there that are not mentioned, such as Smokey Smith, one of our most decorated veterans, Roy Thompson, newspaper baron. It's Alexander Graham Bell did some great work in this country. No mention. I'm a Glenn Gould fan, but he's not there anymore. He was once.
Or explorers, or the War of 1812. One wonders whether it's still there. The motivation of the Harper era citizenship guide was to create a sense of history, not to create a sense of historical grievances or a morality story about how the evils of the past are sort of gradually rectified through emphasis on identity and marginalized groups and so forth, but to push Canadian history as far back into the past as it can realistically go. Now, there is, as we know, there is an alternative vision of Canadian history that is shaped almost entirely by the federal Liberal Party, which has historically, I think, seen Canadian history not as a unifying, not as a force for unity, warts and all, because not all of it is necessarily nice or pleasant. Some of it, if you're not inclined to if you don't have a taste for constitutional history and political arguments, some of it might be very boring for you. But that's not the point. It happened, and it is our history. There is an alternative view whereby this is divisive and it's harmful and it prevents the formation of, I don't know what, some sort of new vision of what it means to be Canadian, or some sort of post-national, and this horrific phrase that Trudeau Jr. gave us, some sort of post-national Canada. Now, I don't think that this is a good thing to do. I don't think that it is accurate to call us a post-national state. And even if we were, I don't think it would be good. The efforts to make this sort of meme this into existence have failed. And again, we need to know more about who we are, where we came from, and we need to teach that to newcomers. And we ideally we would do so as free from political and identitarian biases as we possibly can.
Well, look, let's pick up on that point, because you and I both know the man who actually held the pen on this document. Jason Kenney, obviously, is the minister responsible at the time, has the responsibility for it, and frankly, I think the honor of because it was a tremendously well written document.
Mm-hmm.
But it was actually Chris Champion who wrote it.
Yes,
and it seems to me that he went to extraordinary lengths to be fair. For example, there was no, and I believe our story talks about this, there was no message from the minister with this minister's smiling face.
Correct.
Can you just talk a little bit about the efforts that they went to, that this could be a unifying document as opposed to one that just makes people think, well, I don't want anything to do with that.
The first order of business was to create a description, an accurate description, as opposed to a political a description of the way things are, of how Canada is and how it has truly evolved, as opposed to a political proclamation about how it should be in accordance with the views of a particular political party. Now, that means that the beaming face of the minister, as though befitting a white paper or some sort of formal report to to the department or something like that. That is not the kind of tone that needs to be set there, and the minister won't be the minister forever. I mean, Minister Kenny was former Minister Kenny was Minister of Immigration for a long time, but it eventually came to an end. He's not going to be there, and neither is the Harper government. But the truth of the history in question and the facts that newcomers need to know, those are perennial things that don't go out of date. And what I detect again from the Blacklock story is more sort of the niche concerns of a particularly sort of urban slice of the liberal electorate, very much preoccupied with mid 2010s concerns, and that in and of itself, I think, is already out of date, and the emphasis should be much more on a shared, unifying narrative that avoids these sort of pointillist, minute concerns about identity and grievance, let's say.
Now, Michael, you are a professional historian. I mean, you're working as a strategic advisor for Atlas, but you've actually got a book coming out later this fall talking about the crisis of liberalism. I'm going to give you a moment to just speak of that in a moment. But as a historian and somebody who worked in the Harper government, you know what is and isn't true here. So why do you think that other historians aren't chiming in and complaining that some of the very people who are being erased, why aren't they challenging this?
Well, I suspect that very few people are aware that this. First of all, very few people know what goes into the process of gaining citizenship. I mean, that's just a fact. I don't know why your typical Canadian would take an interest in that. It's not really it's not in the top 5 issues that I think most people would be worrying about. So that's one thing. The second thing is people probably haven't heard of the Citizenship Guide or would very rarely come across one. This process has not, as far as I know, been subject to a public consultation. They may well have had input from academic historians or other other historians outside academia. They may have had their input, and some of that input may well have been critical, as far as I know. I mean, I know that there's a certain groupthink within academia, but I'm willing to suppose that at least some academic historians would hold a different sort of view. But I don't think that objection or those objections or critiques, if they were made, would have held the day in the face of what I think is a very sort of ideological, liberal, progressivist vision of not only Canadian history, but also what it means to be a citizen. I mean, I think that that's something that has been left out of this, which I might have actually mentioned earlier, that part of the emphasis of the former Citizenship Guide was on the duties of citizenship, was on the expectations of a new Canadian, of any kind of Canadian citizen, new, old, what have you, that there are rights, of course, which we've heard about nonstop since the first Trudeau era, but there are also duties that go along with those rights. And I'm not going to make a necessarily a blanket statement about this, but the question of what is expected of a citizen, what a good citizen should do or should not do, that is not really part of the contemporary progressivist liberal discourse, if I can put it that way. There's a sense in which it's also absent from other forms of, say, libertarian thought, where there's very much an emphasis on the rights of the person, but not on his duties. I believe that the previous guide got that balance precisely right. I think that it's not there, or not to an adequate degree in contemporary discourse from the progressivist liberal quarters.
Michael, we're rapidly running out of time. This has been a fascinating conversation. But one last question. We think we elect governments to do certain things. Those are the things that they present in their platform at an election. But I don't recall this government ever getting a mandate to rewrite Canadian history. I mean, did I miss something?
I don't think they have such a mandate at all. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. What was wrong with the previous guide? I don't think there was anything. And history is, there's room for new opinions and so forth. But the key facts of the evolution of our country they don't change. I mean, they don't just sort of need to be updated every so often. The nature and workings of Parliament don't change. They haven't changed. The way our Constitution is set up, as described in the old Citizenship Guide, these things don't need to be re-articulated every couple of years. And I would say that the burden of proof is on the people who wish to change it. Why? What's the reason?
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I find myself asking. I can only conclude that the government that we've had for the last 10 years had concluded that a lot of Canadians needed an attitude adjustment and presumed that theirs was the job to give it to them, and theirs was the attitude that the rest of us should accept. And I'm prepared to say what I wouldn't encourage you to say on this program, but sort them. Now, Michael, tell us a little about your book, and then we've got to go.
So my book is about liberalism, not liberalism with a capital L, but with a small l. So think of John Locke, John Stuart Mill, or the sort of general idea that dominates Western political discourse, that we are by nature free, and that politics must secure personal freedom. Now, this is still the dominant theory in Canada, in the West, in the United States, Britain, France, everywhere, at least in the West. And there are other places in the world that still aspire to be free and liberal. But everybody knows that there's something wrong with it. There is a crisis. Why did liberalism not spread more after the end of the Cold War? Why do we have people in the West of every political persuasion now who think that perhaps there's too much freedom? Why did we have a liberal party effectively go to war against something called the Freedom Convoy? Perhaps there's something that we don't understand about freedom. Perhaps there's some element of why we are or ought to be free that has been confused or lost in a discourse of ever increasing personal rights and individual liberties and so forth. This is what I explore in the book. It'll be out at the end of April, and I hope that people will read it and maybe get a kick out of it. Even if they hate it, I hope they get a kick out of it.
I can think of at least 5 former Conservative MPs who ought to be made to read it and then write an essay about it. Anyway, in the meantime, look, I wish you every success with it. And it's a message that certainly needs to be widely understood, much more widely than it is now. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Michael Bonner, talking to us about the new Citizenship Guide for the Western Standard. I'm Nigel Hannaford.